Ladies and gentlemen, we do thank you very much for your attention, and now we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the
Welcome to the Top Travel Destinations. I'm your host, Kevin Flanagan, here to use my 20 years of experience as a top travel writer with the Sunday Independent to show you where to stay, eat, shop and explore when you visit the world's top travel destinations. So sit back and enjoy our journey together. You're very welcome. For me, a very special podcast. I'm here with someone I've known and followed and supported, I hope, for many years, and that's Pat Rigney, or the famous, legendary PJ Rigney of Gunpowder Gin and the Drumshanbo Centre in County Leitrim, a place that's dear to his heart. Your parents met there and married there, in fact. Wasn't that right?
Yeah, my mum was working in Rigney Mines as the bookkeeper. My dad showed up as the auditor, and the rest became history.
And you've now repaid that in sort of spades by creating this incredible visitor centre where you can enjoy and see the process of what has made Gunpowder Gin and Sausage Tree Vodka and, of course, your whiskey drunk by the likes of Prince Albert of Monaco and Count von Hardenberg. How in heaven's name did you do it, Pat?
The Shed Distillery, where we're based in Drumshanbo, we started in 2014 with one employee and a vision to create something that would be very special. And we'll be 10 years there next year at the end, on the 21st of December. But really, it's the people of Drumshanbo and I guess the team that we've assembled over that period of time that have created something very special that is not just available in Ireland but around the world. And we have a great welcome centre there where people can actually come and see how we make Drumshanbo Gunpowder Irish Gin and our single pot still Irish whiskey, and maybe get a sense that the magic behind the brand and the curious journeys that I've taken over many years that brought us to this place.
And we are here to talk about those journeys. As the Top Travel Destinations podcast, we're interested in people who love to travel. And I can think of no one who has more passion and more experience of travel than the man sitting in front of me.
Well, I've travelled so much over so many years. I mean, I believe I may have travelled certainly between 4,000 and 5,000 days since I started working in 1982 as a 20-year-old in short trousers all over the world. Primarily financed by my employer, Bailey's and Carolyn's Irish Cream over the years. But I'm still as excited today when I board an aircraft, if not more so, than I was when I started back in the early 80s.
And when I look at the incredible story of Gunpowder and the ingredients, just share with our listeners a little bit about how your journey helped create this incredible product.
Well, we've 12 ingredients and they come from around the world, and maybe just focus on one or two. Gunpowder tea, which comes from China, not too far from Shanghai, from Zhejiang province. That gunpowder tea is known as gunpowder tea because it's rolled up into little balls that look a little bit like gunpowder. That was an ingredient I was intrigued with from visits there. You know, cardamom from India and all our citrus then from various parts of the world. So it's just bringing unrelated things together, and that's part of the magic of travel. You know, you're able to maybe connect things that otherwise would not be connected, and that's how we ended up with Drumshanbo Gunpowder Irish Gin.
I've noticed that people are still, maybe it's a carryover from the experiences of the last couple of years, people are still a little bit reluctant to travel, particularly if they're slightly older. I've just noticed that. What would you say to someone who's maybe undecided about taking a long journey? What can they gain, and what have you gained by traveling to these incredible top destinations around the world?
Well, the first thing, I guess, is they give me great energy. You are enriched, you know, it's exciting. You come up with new ideas. My best ideas come up when I travel. You have totally new experiences and you come home totally refreshed and ready to go again. And it really is, over time, a life-transforming experience to travel. And of course, you get a much better appreciation of the world. And it was interesting on a recent visit to India. I spent almost a month there and very powerful experience. But when I came home and I looked at some of the media, I was looking at it going, you know, what we're worried about really we shouldn't be worried about, because people have much bigger things to worry about in India, but they're not complaining. So I think it puts things in perspective.
Yes, I completely agree. When I came back from Cambodia and the killing fields in Angkor Wat in January of this year, it was sort of very stark, the contrast to preoccupations of first world countries compared to the life and death struggle and so many people sharing our planet.
Yeah, and before I visited India in February, which was a very powerful, very meaningful experience, I was in San Francisco, which has issues at the moment with drug addiction and people on the streets. And I felt that the contrast couldn't have been more stark. Here's a first world country where, they have these massive resources and they have issues that they have to deal with in some of these cities. And yet I was in India and I never saw anybody in India that was in a similar place as in San Francisco. And I thought that was quite stark.
Yes. Well, now we're going to dive into the incredible mind of Pat Rigney. He's going to talk about 3 top travel destinations. What's the first one you're going to share with our listeners and tell a little bit about?
Well, I guess one is a more recent visit, which was to New Delhi in January, February of this year. We arrived and stayed in the Imperial Hotel, which is really an extraordinary colonial style hotel in and around the centre of the city. And that was spectacular in terms of just the rooms, the ambience, and the magic of the people that you would meet there. We did the usual sightseeing that you might expect, but we did something very special. We did the early morning cycle tour of Old Delhi, which leaves at 5:30 in the morning as it's still dark. We got the tuk-tuk and headed off, picked up the bikes with a guide, and that was a really powerful experience going through the old streets as people were waking up. The food stalls were beginning to get moving. The shops were opening up. The magic about that part is, that there are no supermarkets in that part of Delhi, and there aren't huge amounts of supermarkets in India in any case. So you've got all the different stalls selling all the different things. Just magical. And we ended up in various temples. It was very powerful. And in fact, we ended up in the Tibetan area of Delhi, which I didn't even know existed, which was quite special.
Wow. What was it that really captured your imagination there and on this incredible bike ride?
I think it's just the hustle and bustle and the life. People waking up. There's a very spiritual feeling when you're in India, and there's just a life force there that I haven't quite seen anywhere else in that way. And everybody very close to each other, but everybody getting on with life, nobody complaining, and everybody doing something.
And I know that you are a huge proponent of taking cycling tours. And we had a podcast recently with Anthony Walsh, a famous cyclist, and he was sharing how if you take a bike around any capital city, it's the only way to really see it. I was taken aback by that, but you're doing the same thing in all the cities you go to. Tell us what it is about having a recreational bike tour of a new city.
Well, I think the first thing is when you're on the bike, you feel more like a child than you do like an adult, and you're just out there. You feel free, and if you've got a great guide with you and you encourage them to take you off Main Street, you will see all sorts of exciting and new things, and that's what we try to do everywhere we go.
Wow. And you just literally consult your local guidebook and check out a couple of city tours by bike and book a tour.
That's what we do. We go online and we basically Google, we come up with 3 or 4. We try to do the stuff that's a little off Main Street, make some inquiries, and then we just go for it.
Wow, that is amazing. We're going to include all the details and the destinations that Pat's going to talk about. That will be in the accompanying article, which you'll be able to click on in this link. Just tell us a little bit about Delhi. And you've mentioned where you can stay at the Imperial. You would strongly recommend that.
Yeah, the Imperial, it's a very, very good hotel, but it's not part of a chain. And because of that, it's very unique and just a great location. From there, we were able to mooch around the city and explore all the various sights and sounds and smells and everything else.
And if someone said, well, Delhi's a long way away, why would I bother to go to somewhere like Delhi? What would you say to them?
Interestingly, it's closer than I expected. It's about a 7-hour flight to Abu Dhabi, and then it's only another 2.5 hours. It's actually relatively close, but it will take you further away, perhaps, than anywhere you might have been before. It's a very, very different place.
In a few words, describe the quality of that difference.
Gosh, I think maybe being Irish from our generation, certainly my generation, was born in the 60s, where we didn't have a whole lot, or certainly our parents didn't have a whole lot, kind of brings you back to that gritty existence and all the excitement that goes with it. Obviously, there's a tremendous colonial history there as well, so you get to see all of that. Cricket is something that you get to learn about very quickly. It's a huge unifier in India. There seems to be two, Bollywood and cricket. There's a whole life force that I can't put my finger on, but deep down through the whole experience, there's a spirituality and a simplicity that reminds me of maybe my childhood.
That's amazing. Yeah. Any way you'd recommend people to eat and drink in Delhi, or to go about the process of eating and drinking?
God, I was given so much advice before I went to India about what not to eat. We thankfully didn't have any issues. I think you have to be careful of the street food. I think you need to eat in a recognized restaurant. What was interesting is everywhere we ate, all the food was freshly prepared everywhere. It was suggested that we shouldn't eat from buffets, which we didn't. But we just mooched around and we found restaurants that had a level of recommendation, and then all the food was cooked fresh in front of us, and we were very comfortable with that. And we had some beautiful meals. And not as spicy, by the way, as I expected it to be, but the rice was sensational. They don't eat a huge amount of meat, so it's a lot of vegetarian, but just being careful about what you drink and ice and all those things just to make sure you're okay.
And as regards vaccinations, was that required before you left?
There were some vaccinations recommended, which we took. I don't remember all the details of them, but they weren't onerous or anything.
Yeah.
And, in the area we were, there was no malaria. We went into Rajasthan and then we went down to Mumbai and down to Kerala. So you just need to be aware of that. But, what really surprised me was some of their infrastructure. Their airports are sensational. Some of the new airports we were in, the hotels by and large, the better hotels are outstanding. And the welcome you'll receive will be like something you've never received before.
Wow. And is it a convivial place to go and have a drink when you wanted to chill out in the evening? Where did you go to have a drink? A man who knows more about drinking than most.
Well, we generally stayed in and around the hotel and had a cocktail in the hotel, and that was quite normal. There's a lot of whiskey consumed as well as gin in India. They're probably the two biggest areas of consumption. And we tried both. But on the whiskey side, they're now the largest consumers of scotch in the world.
Wow.
Which is interesting. And they have their own whiskey. So we got to try all sorts of different styles. And their whiskey tends to be a bit lighter and a little bit sweeter. And we enjoyed that very much.
And are they developing a taste for the Gunpowder gin and sausage vodka and your own extraordinary whiskey?
They are. And Drumshanbo Gunpowder Irish Gin would probably be within the top maybe 6 premium imported gins now in India, doing very, very well. They love the taste, they love the look, they love the feel of the brand, and they're very careful about what they consume in terms of, they have a lot of pride in the choice that they make, and that's reflected then in what they might purchase for their friends and family. And giving is a big thing in India as it is in China, so giving our brand as a gift is a good thing.
And it's incredible the amount of work you put in your travels to spreading the word on this incredible Irish products.
Yes, we spent a lot of time. So while I was doing a lot of personal stuff on this trip, we spent a lot of time in the marketplace with our partner over there, visiting stores and shops and bars and bartenders. And one of our team is just back from Mumbai from a trip.
What is it like shopping in Delhi? What's that experience like, and what would you recommend people look out for coming from the West?
Well, it depends what you want to buy. Again, you need a bit of local knowledge. So we kind of hooked up with our distribution partner who brought us to some really interesting stores. There was great choice, whether it was fabrics or some other things we wanted to take home. So we got a bit of advice. We didn't just show up. So wherever you're staying in Delhi, have a conversation and get some recommendations. And that's what we did.
And I think from my own experience of traveling in Asia, if you can make friends with the concierge of the place you're staying in, that can be an incredible start to a journey. I made great friends with a gentleman called Diamond who's taken me around Asia. And there's nothing like having someone who speaks the language and who knows where not to go as well as where to go.
That's exactly the case. And we did that on just about everywhere. In fact, the cycling tour is not a bad place to start, whoever that guide is, or anybody you're doing a tour with. But obviously the concierge is also an excellent choice.
Yes. Anything you want to say about exploring Delhi or the surrounding region before we look at your second destination?
We hired a car with a driver and we went up to Rajasthan. We went up initially to the Taj Mahal and then we went up to Jaipur, Jodhpur and so on. That part of the country is very rustic. And I would say to anybody that is interested in visiting India, don't hang about, because the country is developing. Go there as soon as you can before the magic might get toned down a bit. We also visit Kerala in the south, and we felt that was a bit more touristy. We felt Rajasthan was spectacular, and it has the rawness that really excites and invigorates. You'll see stuff that you just wouldn't see. You'll see some medieval sites that I can't imagine that they'll be there in 10 years' time.
Such as?
Such as a cow, for example, pulling a water wheel.
Yeah.
That kind of simple thing in a rice field. You might say that's behind the times, but a lot of those kind of visuals and people just out doing simple tasks in the fields.
Yes, when I was in Goa in January, the cows on the road are quite extraordinary because they're sacred. That whole field, it's a different time. It's like time goes at a different pace, which is life-giving in a way to see that.
It is, and they hold animals in very high regard for spiritual reasons. In Mumbai, it was interesting. Near the Taj Hotel, you've got the Freedom Arch of Mumbai looking out into the ocean, and there are thousands of pigeons there. Now, in other parts of the world, they'd be getting rid of the pigeons, but not there. They feed the pigeons. So there's a totally different way of looking at nature.
And was the Taj Mahal, did it live up to your expectations? What was that like, standing at that, possibly one of the most iconic destinations on the planet?
Do you know what? It exceeded my expectations because I didn't expect it to be so good. The trick is to arrive very early in the morning. So I think we were there about 6:30 in the morning, just for dawn. And we had the most wonderful tour. It's better than I imagined, or we imagined.
And what was the quality of that experience of being in the Taj Mahal?
Just the scale, the awe, and to think that this was done for the love of his life, this monument on a scale that is just unimaginable. But the beauty, the effort, and you see that all the way through India.
Yeah.
It's everywhere you look.
Yes, and I think that is one thing we were talking about Angkor Wat together earlier, and how that again was made by a king for his beloved, and a scale that is unimaginable.
Yes, I've had the privilege of being to Angkor Wat, another very deep spiritual experience. And I guess one of the things that you learn as you travel is, and I remember when we were on our honeymoon in Egypt, I decided to surprise my bride by going to Egypt, and I bought this beautiful picture of the Last Judgment at the time. This was back in 1991. And I remember bringing it home and looking at it and saying, Denise, that's exactly the same as the Christian story. And of course, it was. And that went back to Egypt and probably 2,000 years before Christ. But everywhere I go, I guess the one thing I've learned is it's the same story.
Yes, yes. And really, as Socrates said about, searching for meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think in India, you certainly get that spiritual connection everywhere you look and everywhere you turn.
Yes. That brings us on to our second destination of PJ Rigney. Pat, where would you take us?
There's so many, but I've been in Shanghai twice this year. Why am I saying Shanghai? I think Shanghai is very interesting right now because since COVID, a lot of Westerners left the city. So if you go, not that you have the city to yourself, you don't, but maybe you'll see it fresh and see it maybe in a different way than you've seen it before. There's been a lot of development in the city. Their infrastructure is spectacular. It's a very safe place. The welcome is tremendous. And again, we did the cycle tour, but this time we did a night tour very recently, about 4 weeks ago, where we ended up on this crazy tour with this lady we met in an apartment complex, and she took us around Shanghai at night, which is very atmospheric, into the French Quarter, into some markets with live frogs and all sorts of things, to ending up in the Bund area, which is very spectacular. You really feel the vibe of the city. And because there aren't a whole lot of Westerners there right now, I certainly get quite a buzz out of that you're kind of on your own. You're almost exploring something very exciting and very unique.
My experience of China is sometimes it's difficult with not that many people actually speak English. So unless you do have your Mandarin, you could be a little bit isolated. How did you find it in Shanghai?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's a little tricky at the moment because credit cards are not accepted everywhere. On WeChat, there's WePay, and that's a bit of a challenge. You really need to be on WePay, which is that app, to make sure that you can pay everywhere and so on. I suppose a little bit of preparation in terms of where we're going, what we were doing. We got over that problem. But because we were kind of standing out, we were approached a lot of the time maybe to do stuff because there weren't that many tourists. And we took a few flyers and we just went and did it. It's a very stimulating place at this moment in time to visit.
Okay. Anywhere you'd recommend to stay?
We were kind of on business, so we were a more industrial area of Shanghai, if you want to call it that. I think anywhere around the French Quarter is well worth staying. Anywhere around the Bund. Hotels are great value in Shanghai right now. You can stay in a really good hotel for modest amounts of money because they have a lot of capacity. They have the bullet train. They're incredible train stations there now to move around outside Shanghai. There's some great airports as well. So getting in and out of the place is very straightforward.
And when it comes to eating and drinking, what would be your general advice for visitors?
Well, we eat just about anywhere and everywhere. The great thing about China is it's safe to eat anywhere. Street food is safe. Hygiene standards are pretty good. So we did street food. We again spoke to the concierge. We tried to get to some interesting, authentic Chinese restaurants. I wasn't quite sure sometimes what I was eating, but it was all very enjoyable and we had a lot of fun.
Yes. And what about the shopping experience in Shanghai?
Shopping is very sophisticated now. There's probably two parts to the shopping. You've got all the big brands there. So you've got all those shopping malls that you'd see almost anywhere in the world. But they also have markets. But I'd recommend going to a Carrefour, one of the bigger supermarkets, and just walking through and just seeing what's on offer. And even in Carrefour, they'll have the live frogs and different things. And then there are market areas, fruit markets, and you need to check them out. Where are they? There's some flea markets as well that are worth seeing. But you're going to have to do a little bit of checking. Probably the most exciting market we've been to this year was, moving back now to India, was with the fish market in Mumbai. We went there at 4:30 in the morning for a special tour of the fish coming in, and I've never seen anything like it. So the fish comes in from all the small fishermen. It's all collected and sold, and that was a pretty life-changing experience to see the action in Mumbai, if you can do that. It's about 4:30 in the morning.
Wow, you don't mind getting up early to catch the early bird, as they say.
Well, if you want to see something spectacular, you sometimes have to get up in the middle of the night.
And what did you particularly get out of going to that market and seeing that activity?
Well, the fish is being landed from all these boats. First of all, the fish, I didn't recognize most of them. There was no ice. The fish were just coming in. It was being collected, but it was being sold immediately. And women in particular were seen to be running the show, and they were in charge. It's actually hard to get somebody to take you on that tour, but if you can get on it, it probably takes you back almost to medieval times. They've been doing it this way probably for a couple of thousand years. Maybe in 10, 15 years' time, somebody will say the hygiene isn't up to whatever, and it'll be gone, gone forever.
Yes. So visit. I really can almost feel the sense of excitement as you describe Shanghai. Is there any final word on why to go to Shanghai, what else to do, and what you can expect to get from such a trip?
I think the culture is quite different, and I find that very invigorating because I'm all the time trying to connect with them and work out exactly what's going on. I have huge respect for their culture and the way they do things, but because it's different, it's exciting.
Yes. How are they taking to Drumshanbo and all the various things that you have to offer?
Well, we were attending the Chinese International Import Expo where we were showing it for the first time, and we hope to be there very shortly. What was extraordinary about it was that this is the biggest trade fair I've ever seen in the world. 500,000 people visited this over 5 days. The actual venue was probably the size of Dublin Airport multiplied by 10, 20, and just the scale of everything. There's just an awe of the scale of things in China.
What does that make you feel when you come back?
Very small. And I'm very aware. I mean, it's very humbling. And 5 million people, global population, 8 billion, population in China, 1.4. We are small. And yet I'm very proud of our industry and the drinks industry. We've some of the biggest brands in the world. Number one liqueur in the world with Bailey's, which I was privileged to work with. The Jamesons, the Tullamore Dews, Drumshanbo Gunpowder. And for many people around the world, their first connection with Ireland is either music, poetry or writing, or one of our drinks brands.
Yeah.
And that's how they connect with the country.
Yes, yes. Guinness, of course, being an outstanding example.
Of course, Guinness, yeah.
That brings us on to our third and final destination that you're going to share with our listeners, Pat.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting one because it's a city that I visit probably 3 to 4 times every year, and it's a part of the city that I didn't realize had this very unique thing going on. It's New York. I love New York, particularly love it for the energy, but the way it regenerates. It's always regenerating. And over my lifetime, there's parts of the city that will have regenerated maybe a couple of times. But there's an area not too far from Brooklyn called Williamsburg. And we visited there not so long ago to see the Hasidic Jewish community in action. There's a special tour you can do where you actually go and immerse yourself for the day with the community and in their lifestyle. And that for me was pretty mind-blowing experience, because here in this very first world city is a community of about 200,000, maybe a little more, living a lifestyle that is more akin to 200, 300 years ago, and very successfully doing it. And so we immersed ourselves there for the better part of the day with the people on the tour. And that was like going back in time. And I'm still not quite sure how they managed to keep it together, given there's so many distractions in the city, but they do, and they're very successful.
I love the way you really are invested in tours. What does that give you, and why should listeners investigate going on, whether they're bike tours or walking tours or tours to special interests? Why do you use tours so much?
I never really thought about it, but I suppose they take you out of your normal day-to-day routine. I find them very adventurous. I find them exciting. I learn a lot. They make me more creative. I'm coming back with loads of ideas sometimes from a particular tour for our business or whatever. They make me feel alive. That's being honest.
New York, I'd love to hear your take on where to stay, eat and drink.
Gosh. Well, what we've been doing lately in New York, certainly for the last 5 to 6 years, every time we go, we stay in a different hotel. So we move around. The most recent area we were in was in Soho.
That's a fabulous area.
Fabulous area. Now, the only issue with the hotels in New York sometimes is the rooms can be quite small and you have to do a little bit of work. And it's quite expensive at the moment with the dollar. But we just keep moving around with all different parts of the city. Midtown, less so. And we're more in the Soho area, down that part, heading towards downtown.
Little Italy and Chinatown, that whole enclave where you could walk from one culture, from Little Italy into Chinatown. It's the most extraordinary.
Yeah, we do that. We walk all the time. We're in New York, we walk. We also use the app for the city bike. We use the tube or the Met, the underground or whatever.
They have bikes that you can drop and hire and drop and return to different stands.
Yes, they do. And they have the e-bikes now, and it's great fun. It's a little bit dangerous, but it's great fun to do it. I strongly recommend it.
You don't think the e-bike's too soft an option?
Well, if you want to cover distance, well, actually, the other bikes are hard work to push. That sometimes you can't get an e-bike and you have to take the regular one. But if you want to get around, it's a great way.
Yes.
And you must walk the Brooklyn Bridge, all the usual stuff. Try and get away from some of the more touristy areas.
Yes.
It's a relatively safe city.
Yes. And anywhere in particular you'd recommend for a drink or to have a meal?
Well, the Carlisle Hotel has an incredible bar called Bemelin's. It's a bar that goes back to the 20s and the 30s, probably the most famous, iconic bar in New York.
Woody Allen plays there, doesn't he?
He has played there, and there's jazz most nights. Yeah. They can take some bookings, and you can book online, but you can just show up. And what's amazing is every age group and every background is acceptable. So, and they do tapas type food in the bar as well. And of course, Gunpowder is served there.
Brilliant. Any other bars, any other hot places to eat or drink that have taken your fancy recently?
Well, the Dead Rabbit, it's like a religious experience. I go there on a regular basis when we're in New York. But again, outside of that, we're always trying new places. So what's new, what's happening? And what we find is in New York, there's a huge amount of regeneration. What was interesting and new 2 years ago might have moved on. So Bemelin's would be a bit of an exception. So would the Dead Rabbit. You just need to be asking and checking out what's new, what's happening, and try it out.
Yes. Do you have a favorite area to shop?
In New York? Well, Macy's is still the basic. We go there just for the basic nuts and bolts if we're in New York. I'm a big guy. I'm a tall guy. So Brooks Brothers is a definite for me for men's. And that's a chain within the US and throughout New York. But again, depending on what the mood is, what the time is, we'll mooch around and see what's happening. Are there some markets on Sunday in Union Square? Rather than going to the same place, we're all the time looking for new places.
And what's your process for discovering that you could share with our listeners?
It's not particularly organized. It really is asking lots of questions, and then taking a bit of a flyer sometimes and just going and exploring. And then sometimes the magic starts because you fall on something that you would otherwise never have encountered. And I do it with my wife, Denise. So sometimes she says this, why don't we try this? And off we go. So I think it's about experimentation, never stopping to experiment, continuing to take small risks and small gambles with wherever you're going, what you're doing, and following your gut as well. So if you feel there's somebody decent who's going to show you around, go for it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. You've given us 3 fantastic destinations. Put them in order. If we were to pick to visit 1, 2, 3, what order would you put those in and why?
I suppose I'm thinking of timing as well. India, number 1. Why? I think it's very precious what we experienced there. I just hope with Modi's development of the country that it isn't lost in all of that. But I would try and get to India sooner rather than later. Shanghai is number 2. And the reason for that, again, is before you know it, the tourists will all be back there and it'll be back to where it was. So it's a great time to visit there because you'll be treated like royalty because you're in short supply in Shanghai at the moment if you go there. And 3, New York. New York is there. It's not going anywhere. But do try the Williamsburg experience if you can.
Pat, I am absolutely zinging with energy after hearing you. I just love your insights and I love your energy. I absolutely love the way that you will find someone. And if you look, you will find someone like my diamond who took me around Cambodia and Thailand. And I think that the trick is to just be open.
Yes. To be open and let your guard down where you feel it's safe to do so. And I think in India, we were more relaxed. We met just some amazing people that we just couldn't get over their kindness and their generosity and also how proud they are of their country and of their culture. We're very fortunate to have many from India here now, particularly in the healthcare. And you could see that with them, very special people.
Well, I'm looking forward to visiting those places. I am particularly looking forward to raising a glass of gunpowder when I hit one of those bars in the Imperial Hotel.
Thank you very much,
Rigney,
Kevin.
thank you so much for an absolutely wonderful tour of your top travel destinations.
Thanks a million, Kevin.